My name is Kirk Paulson, and I'll be your host for about the next hour. And we will be featuring all of the new features in DxO OpticsPro 11. So this webinar assumes that you have some passing experience with OpticsPro. Perhaps you're a user, perhaps you've downloaded the trial version. We're going to dive into what's new and exciting about this particular release. What we're going to do is I'm just going to show just some slides real quickly just to give you some background information about the new features in OpticsPro 11, and then I'll dive right into a more detailed demo. For your information, you're probably wondering who is this guy who's presenting. I'm currently acting as consulting chief marketing officer for DxO, but I've been an official photographer for the U.S. freestyle ski team for quite a number of years. That's a photo of me at the USA World Cup in Deer Valley, Utah recently. Got about 50 pounds of kit on my back, and I hike up with my crampons up the mogul course on the left, and that's the aerials course on the right. And so you'll see a number of photographs of some amazing athletes, aerialists, and mogul skiers during the course of the presentation, as well as other images that we've recently licensed from very, very talented photographers that we work closely with here at DxO. So who is DxO? For those of you who aren't familiar with us, just to set some context, we are in fact scientists dedicated to the art of photography, and this is proven by the fact that there are at least a half a dozen PhDs in image science operating in the office just outside of Paris. I'm actually broadcasting this webinar from our satellite office in San Francisco. And the image scientists at DxO continue to innovate at a breakneck pace. Of course, last year they introduced the now multi-award-winning DxO One camera, which is a miniaturized pro-quality camera that attaches directly to your iPhone. There's also another team responsible for DxO Mark, which performs detailed analyses on cameras and lenses and smartphones, and then posts those free to the public. If you haven't been to DxOMark.com, I highly recommend you do visit and go ahead and check out their ratings for your own kit or kit you might be considering investing in. And then, of course, there's the desktop division, and the flagship of which is OpticsPro, which is, of course, cross-platform, very advanced raw image processing solution for Mac and PC, and that's what we're going to focus on today. In fact, we're going to focus exclusively on the very latest version, OpticsPro 11, which we only just recently introduced. Now, the key to OpticsPro is that it allows photographers of all levels to automatically correct for optical defects inherent in cameras and lenses, and it's the automatic correction part which is especially unique and innovative to OpticsPro, and that advantage continues on a number of levels with this new release. Of course, the automatic corrections are made possible by DxO Optics modules, which you're invited to download as soon as you launch OpticsPro and you point it at a folder of images. It reads the metadata in the images and prompts you to download optics modules that are specific not only to the camera make and lens make and model that you use to capture the photo, but also, if it's a zoom lens, the specific focal length that you were using at the time, the exact aperture you had set, and in fact it also knows the focus distance that you were using to capture that specific image. So these are very, very detailed modules which help OpticsPro to apply these automatic corrections. The team at OpticsPro in Paris continues to analyze more and more new camera bodies and lenses as they're introduced, and they're now fast approaching 30,000 different camera and lens combinations which are supported, which is pretty amazing. So my guess is your camera and lens combination is most likely supported. And this is what allows OpticsPro to perform its magic. So without you doing anything, you simply point at a folder of images, and then you click on any individual image in the folder, and immediately a number of optical corrections are applied to the image without you doing anything. And I don't think many people realize that that's actually at the heart of it. So if you're a novice, it may be all that you have to do to the image, and you're ready to export it and share it. And if you're a pro or a power user, a hardcore photo enthusiast, it can make for a really great starting point at the very least. And then there are other features in OpticsPro, such as Clear View, which have been introduced over the years. And although those aren't applied automatically by pointing at the image, they can be applied and enhance your photos simply by clicking them. Just by turning them on, they perform a very detailed analysis on the image and then apply corrections. And one of the things I want to point out is, people ask about local versus global corrections. The corrections that OpticsPro applies to your images are in fact global. However, there's a pixel by pixel analysis taking place. So in a photo like this with Clear View being applied, without you brushing in an area or defining a mask or using edge detection or anything of the sort, OpticsPro is in fact aware that there are different zones to this image with different perceived depths, and applies the corrections accordingly. So it's quite intelligent in that regard. So over the years, a number of very innovative features have been added to OpticsPro, and this release is no exception. So without further ado, let's move forward. And what I want to focus on today are just the top 5 features in OpticsPro 11. So we'll cover each of those in turn quickly with slides, and then I'll give you a more in-depth demo of each of them, so you can see them in action in the app itself. Beginning with PRIME 2016. So PRIME, you may be aware, is an acronym for Probabilistic Raw Image Enhancement, which is DxO's OpticsPro's image scientists' way of saying noise reduction. And raw is in the acronym because it works best with raw images for sure. And this new version is PRIME 2016, and it has been upgraded and enhanced and improved dramatically in a number of different ways. Now you might be asking yourself, well, in this day and age of larger sensors with larger pixel sizes gathering more and more light, with integrated noise reduction in the sensor, in image processor, why do we even need noise reduction software? Well, we will always need noise reduction software, at least for the foreseeable future, because advanced photographers tend to push the envelope dramatically. Take, for example, this photo that was shot by our good friend Jean-Marc Alexia, who's based in the Paris office. He's the Nikon shooter, so he captured this nighttime surfing competition with his D4, and in order to get 1/640th of a second at f4.8, he had to set his ISO at 12,000. And of course you can go way beyond that, as you'll see with some of the other examples that I have. Now, the important thing to note about PRIME is that its algorithms are so incredibly intense that they can't actually be previewed in the viewer. So, a lot of times you're changing white balance, you're changing exposure, shadows, highlights, contrast, etc., and of course you're previewing all of those changes in the viewer itself. But when it comes to PRIME, you can't, because it would just take too long for it to render out and update the viewer. And so instead, the preview takes place in a smaller region of interest, the small preview window, which is in the right-hand side of the tools palette. And that's the only place you can actually see what the PRIME effect is going to look like. Now, you do get access to a little magnification window that you can move around on the viewer to look at different parts of your image. And the results are pretty staggering. So by looking at the preview in the little viewer to the right, you can get a very good sense of the job that Prime is going to do. And I'll demonstrate all that so that you see firsthand exactly how that all works. Just a couple of photos that I've rendered out, both with the noise reduction off and with the noise reduction on. So, hopefully in the video conference with your display set up, if you've got a good amount of bandwidth running, you can see some of these changes. So here's the before image shot by Jean-Marc, and you can see lots of chrominance, noise, and luminance speckles throughout the night sky. And then here's the after image after processing and applying Prime. All of the noise has been completely removed, and yet the very fine details of the water and the board and so forth are all perfectly retained. Here's another example. In this case, I've zoomed in 1:1, and we're just looking at the athlete's hand holding the ball and his leg and the folds of the cloth on the uniform, and then very importantly the bouquet in the background. So you can see lots of noise throughout the background, and when we look at the rendered version here, let me just go ahead and do that. You can now see that all of the details are still retained. You can see the threading on the baseball. You can see the muscles in his hand and forearm and the folds in the uniform, and yet the bouquet and the transitions in the background, the soft focus, are perfectly smooth, and that's one of the key features of Prime 2016. In this photo here, you've got some darker areas, some shadow areas, as well as the bouquet. This was shot at 25,000 ISOs with a Canon 1DX. Again, quite a lot of chrominance noise in the background. And now let's take a look at the job that Prime 2016 did. So not only are the bouquets perfectly preserved, but the details and the color and the shadow areas are much more faithfully rendered. So huge improvement in image quality and a dramatic improvement in processing speed as well. So what you're looking at here in this chart with the red line is the processing time with the previous version of Prime, so version 10.x and before. And as you can see, as the ISO for your images would increase, there's pretty much a linear increase in processing time required. The higher the ISO, the more processing time required. And for some images at very high ISO, depending on the speed of your machine, it could be half a minute, or more. By the way, I'm running on this machine when I start to demo on a MacBook Pro with an i7 core processor and 16 gigabyte of RAM. I like to really load up my machines with RAM. Naturally, OpticsPro is cross-platform and runs on Windows. If you have any specific questions about, hey, he did that on the Mac, how do I do the equivalent on Windows, just go ahead and use the chat to ask a question of Allison, and she'll be more than happy to answer it for you. But anyway, back to the improvements in processing time. So what you'll notice with Prime 2016 is beginning at about 1600 ISO and beyond, you'll see that as the ISO increases, the amount of processing time required for Prime actually decreases. And so the team was able to make some very important optimizations to the algorithms to make that possible while still maintaining the quality. There's absolutely no sacrifice in the quality whatsoever. As I said, the quality has actually been improved dramatically. And yet it's up to 4 times faster. Again, particularly at the higher ISOs where it matters most. That's where you need your noise reduction the most anyway. So I will point out right now that there is a trial version available for you to download both on Mac and PC. And if you haven't tested it with your own images, now is the time. Download the trial version and take your noisiest, highest ISO, most problematic low-light images and throw it at the Optics Pro 11 trial and see for yourself the job that it's done. We believe this represents the best noise reduction on the planet, bar none. Now moving on, there are actually 3 new tools in Optics Pro 11 that take advantage of face detection. And we're going to cover each of these in turn. So this is the first version of Optics Pro that actually features integrated face detection, and it uses it to apply image corrections, beginning with something we call automated spot-weighted corrections. So spot-weighted corrections, as its name implies, is designed to mimic precisely the effect that you would get from spot metering in camera, but allow you to do it in post with considerable added flexibility. And to our knowledge, this is the first time anything like this has actually been implemented. So if we take a photo like this, shot with a 50mm Canon f1.2, really nice fast prime lens, but as you can see, underexposed and backlight, just pointing at it in Optics Pro will dramatically enhance the image. So it understands that everything on the histogram was shoved to the left. The smart lighting kicks in automatically in a slight mode, and already the image has improved dramatically. But if we want to push it further, we can change the mode from slight to medium to strong. The problem is, as we get to strong, we're expanding the dynamic range. The histogram is moving out and to the right, but now we've unfortunately pushed it up above the blacks, and so blacks have become grays, and we've lost contrast, and the image is pretty washed out, as you can see. So in steps the brand new spot weighted feature, which is a brand new button under smart lighting, and you simply click on that, and then immediately the image just pops, just changes dramatically with a simple click on the user interface. Well, how does it do this? It actually uses face detection, as I mentioned. So you can see right there that little green check mark that one face has been detected. And if you actually click on the tool button just to the left of that check mark, Optics Pro will actually display where the face has been detected, which is a region of interest, and it is that region of interest that is used to apply a very intelligent tone map to the entire photo. So just to be clear, we're not talking about localized corrections per se, something like brushes without brushes or anything like that. However, the tone map is using that area of interest in order to very intelligently apply itself to the entire image. And so this has a number of benefits. What it does is it better extends the dynamic range, and it adds a natural fill light to faces that are in shadow or seriously backlit, and it dramatically improves contrast while optimizing illumination on the faces. So in fact, you could actually have a pixel with exactly the same luminance level, but with the tone map being applied differently to it depending on where the pixel is within the photo itself. So it's really quite intelligent in that respect. It's capable of detecting more than one face. So in this case, we've got this recently married couple, and they're under a shaded tree on a hot day, seriously backlit, and both faces are immediately detected, and the spot-weighted smart lighting feature applies a precise tone map to the whole image based on both of those regions. You can also use the tool in areas where a face hasn't been detected at all. So in this particular case, the gentleman in this temple in Cambodia is looking off to the left, and so the face detection wasn't able to properly model his face and pick him up, and so instead what you get is this little warning down on the right. You can see with the yellow triangle that says no face detected, but you can still use the tool. So you can actually click the tool button right there, and then simply click drag out with your cursor and define the spot yourself manually. And that's what allows you to take an image like this with really deep dark shadows and then a few highlights and and dramatically extend the dynamic range, keep the highlights in check, bring up the shadows, and give us a really nice overall contrast to the entire image based on this tone map that's been applied. Also using face detection technology is a new auto mode for microcontrast. And so microcontrast has existed in OpticsPro for some time, but there's now a magic wand next to it. So you click on it, it analyzes the image, and then applies what it believes is just the right amount of microcontrast to help make the fine details in the image pop without over-sharpening, giving the image an over-sharpened look, which is typically the problem that novices have when they're applying sharpening to their images. Now, microcontrast is not appropriate for portraits because the fine details that it would enhance are things like pores in your skin and wrinkles and 3-day growth and that sort of thing. And so instead what it does is if you click to apply it or you apply it as a batch process, it uses the face detection, and once it detects the faces in that photo, it sets the value to 0, which is the appropriate thing to do. So that's what's really special. One of the special things about the auto spot weighted feature is that you can apply it to a batch of images, and it knows to do the right thing. In fact, it'll look at the ISO of the image, and if it sees that it's a high ISO image, like the one we were looking at earlier with the surfer at night, well, the last thing you want to do is enhance the fine details in your noise. And so it knows that, and it either sets the value at 0 or at a very low value, rather than doing the wrong thing. So it always does the right thing. And then the last of the 3 to make use of face detection is auto red eye correction. So pretty simple, as its name suggests. It is completely automatic. It will detect the face, it will detect the eyes, and automatically remove the red from the pupils. You can click on the tool if you just want to see what it's done under the hood, and then you can hover over and see exactly where the eye and the pupil's been detected. And if for whatever reason it failed to detect an eye, you can click drag a region around it. But most of the time you will not have to do anything. It is completely automatic, which means you can again use it as a batch process with a bunch of images with a red eye and have it remove and correct for the red eye completely automatically. And then lastly, there's a very cool and elegantly designed full screen mode. So you're working in OpticsPro, and you have these various palettes on the left and right, and you have your film strip at the bottom and your toolbar at the top, and sometimes you want it to just all go away so you can really just focus on the beauty of your images, whether you're browsing them or whether you're rating them. Previously, you would have to use keyboard shortcuts to close each of these individual palettes on its own, and now you can just press one button or one keyboard shortcut and you jump immediately to full screen mode. And it's a really gorgeous design. Even though you're in full screen, you still have access to all of your relevant EXIF information, and you have the ability to cull through your images, tagging your picks and selects, and rating your images with keyboard shortcuts. So a new full screen mode as well. So, again, regarding the optics modules, I do like to touch upon that in the beginning. So before we jump into Prime, I just want to give everybody a quick reminder, and this is especially useful for those of you who haven't had a chance to get your hands on OpticsPro just yet. So without me doing anything, OpticsPro knows everything about every one of my images. It knows that this image was shot with, I shot this with my Canon 1D Mark III with a 100 to 400 millimeter zoom. And this little green badge here in the film strip indicates that there's a module waiting to be downloaded. That's because I manually removed this module so I could show you the process. So the process is the module picker appears automatically, and you're prompted to download it. So again, just like the EXIF data, it says, this was shot with a 1D Mark III with a Canon EF 100 400 millimeter lens, and then I just click download, and that optics module is downloaded from our servers to your Mac or PC. You do need to be connected to the internet in order to download the optics modules, so that's important. There's other information, color rendering information, and other camera calibration information that's part of the EXIF that doesn't require you to download it, but the stuff specifically related to the optics modules does require it to be downloaded from the internet. And then what's great is without you doing anything, a number of corrections are automatically applied to the image. There's a compare button right up top. You can just press that. I'll just press and hold it. So you can see the image as shot with crop, so with no corrections applied, and when I release it, you see the image just pop, and you can see what corrections have been applied. If you want to do a side-by-side, you can always view the image side-by-side, and you can just simply double-click to zoom in, and so we just let the corrections render in the preview window, and depending on the bandwidth, hopefully you can see this. It's really dramatic on my Retina display. I can see the image as shot on the left is kind of dull and soft and just doesn't really pop, and the one on the right is absolutely razor sharp, thanks to the various corrections that have been applied. And just to be clear, the corrections that have been applied, that are always applied based on the optics modules, include correction for vignetting. And on the Mac, you have this little blue switch that you can see that shows what OpticsPro has applied automatically without you doing anything. It's different on the Windows. So for anything related to the user interface, if I do something on the Mac and you're wondering, well, how do I do that on my PC, just go ahead and send a question to Allison, and she'll be happy to answer it for you. But I'm using the Mac right now. So it corrects for vignetting. It corrects for lens softness inherent in that lens design. It corrects for chromatic aberration, including lateral chromatic aberration, and it also corrects for distortion based on that specific optics module. And it does it all completely automatically. In fact, you can just see if I turn off any one of these features like distortion, it's off right now just by clicking on either the button or the text distortion itself. And if I click to enable it, you can just, hopefully you can just see that the image pop. Let me put it back. It's off, and we'll turn it on, and you can just see that distortion corrected for automatically without you doing anything. So it's pretty dramatic. Now, one other point about the optics modules is, in some instances, like with this image shot by the very talented Camilla Ferrari. She's a young, extremely talented photographer out of Italy, and this was shot as a Turkish woman. What you see is, instead of green, is you see yellow. And by clicking on the yellow badge, what OpticsPro is telling us that is, hey, I know precisely what body was used for this image. It was shot with a 5D Mark III, but I'm a little confused about the lens because it wasn't a Canon lens. So I need to know from you. You need to tell me, was it shot with a Sigma or a Tamron 24-70? And I happen to know, after talking to Camilla, that she owns a Tamron 24-70. And of course, you can leave the check mark, which will apply the choice for all images with the same ambiguity, as it's called. So you only have to tell it that once, and then those corrections are applied. And so in this case, not only were all of the optical corrections applied, but also a bit of smart lighting was added as well to move the histogram over and expand the dynamic range. And if I want to do even further, it could be something as simple as saying, you know what, let me switch from manual exposure, what I was set to originally, to, had I been set on center weighted, what would that look like? And with just that one click, you can see the entire image popped, and we've gone from this to that with literally all the automatic corrections applied, and then I just changed one thing, which was the effective metering mode that was used. So it's pretty dramatic, and I can verify that you can literally shave hours off of your toning and retouching workflow as a result of these automatic corrections. In fact, the smart lighting is really remarkable. Last thing I want to show you in smart lighting is another photo by Camilla Ferrari. And if we look, all of these corrections have been applied automatically. And we started with this. By the way, I can use keyboard shortcuts. If I hover over any of the tools, OpticsPro will actually give you a tooltip. And in this case, I can see on the Mac, it's the keyboard D to toggle between the two compare modes. On Windows, it's D and another combination. But let me just go ahead and press down the D key. You can see this is what we started with, underexposed, everything pushed to the left on the histogram, very deep black shadows, and without me doing anything at all, the dynamic range has been extended dramatically, and I can see all that detail in the shadows, and it's properly exposed, but without impacting the highlights or the midtones at all. All right, so enough on the automatic corrections. Let's go to full screen here, not the full screen browsing mode, but just the normal working full screen mode. And let's take a look at the all-new Prime 2016. So starting with an extremely high ISO image that I shot at a World Cup in Deer Valley, Utah. You know, late at night, very limited lighting on the course, and the head of the event wanted a photo of the two mogul duelists flipping at the bottom jump heading into the finish line with the massive crowds behind them. So I've got my 1DX set at 1/1000th of a second in order to capture the action midair. Fastest I could go with this lens was f2.8, which required an ISO of 51,000 in order to properly expose the image. So that's just kind of off the charts ISO, as high as you'd ever want to go. And what you can see, if we compare, again, let's look at the original right there, and then release it, you can see a dramatic difference. Now the basic noise reduction, which DxO refers to as HQ, let's just open it up here in the palette so you can see HQ is enabled by itself. That's the high quality, faster noise reduction, which is alongside the even higher quality but takes longer prime noise reduction. That's the HQ has been applied automatically, and so again we can preview HQ in the viewer, not a problem. So we can press D, and there's the original 51,000 ISO image with all of that horrible chrominance noise visible everywhere in the crowd across that smooth tent. And if I release the compare key, you can see it's been reduced dramatically. It's still there, but it's been reduced dramatically. So for an image like this, clearly we would enable Prime. So let's just go ahead and kick it in. So I'll just turn on Prime. Whenever you turn on Prime, you see a little spinning icon in the lower right-hand corner of this window, which is Prime is actually rendering out that region, applying the corrections, the Prime noise reduction to just that particular region, so you can see what it's going to look like. Now you can move that region around by clicking on this magnification center tool. So you just enable that, and a little window appears in the viewer, and now I can drag that window around somewhere. Like I could say, well, let's put it over here against that tent, and then you see the little processing icon, and now we see this area, but with the Prime applied. And just for the sake of demo, you don't have to do this while you're retouching your images, but just so you see the two side by side, I can actually pan this image over, put it right alongside. So now what you're seeing is the impact of the HQ fast noise reduction here in the viewer, and how that compares to the Prime noise reduction in the little window to its right. And at any time, I can click noise reduction off, which will turn it off in both places. And so now you can see this is what we're dealing with to start with all that incredible chrominance noise. And now let's enable it, and you'll see this kick in, and now you'll see that was the HQ, and then sometime thereafter you see the Prime kick in, because again it's longer, it takes longer to apply itself to the images. Now, well, how do you see the total effect of what Prime has done if you can only view it in the viewer? Well, you render the images out. And so if I say export to disk, this photo with the Prime noise reduction applied, I'm going to put it in a folder where I keep my high-res JPEGs, and it starts rendering itself out. You know it's in the process of rendering the image out and exporting it by this little, in the case of the Mac, this little blue progress indicator. And if you click on that, you can actually see that it's processing this image and how much time has already elapsed during the process. And again, depending on the speed of your machine and the ISO and the noise level of the image, it could take anywhere from 30 seconds to a couple of minutes. But it's considerably faster with this particular version of Prime. And so if we move over here, this is the photo that was just rendered out. You can see based on the time that today it was just rendered out and dropped into this folder. And if we look at it full screen, it's markedly improved. So we've taken an image that, in this particular case, the director of the event really, really wanted, especially with the crowds in the background at night, and yet without applying Prime, it was pretty much unusable. And with Prime 2016, all the noise has been effectively removed, but the details are intact. So that gives you an idea of what it's capable of doing. I can show you just a couple of other examples at lower ISO images. So again, this one was 51,000. Let's go to something that was shot at 25,000. This is the photo that I showed you there in the slides earlier. Again, 1DX, but shot at 25,000 ISO. Let's, in this instance, look at the soft focus elements in the background, because those tend to be particularly tricky for noise reduction software. They tend to normally become very plasticky and lose their overall softness. So I'm just going to drop the preview window over here on the cheerleaders in the background, and you can see how beautifully that's been rendered out. Let's go ahead and pan it over just like we did before, so you can see the two side by side. So this is with the HQ fast noise reduction applied on the left, and this would be with Prime rendered out on the right. All of that additional noise that's visible there on the left has been removed, and yet we have a beautiful, smooth bokeh with really, really nice natural-looking transitions throughout, and yet all of the details remain perfectly intact. I guess lastly, let's go to our friend the surfer. This image that was shot by Jean-Marc, and we'll take that preview window and we'll pull it over here. And right, what we're looking at right now again is the default high quality fast noise reduction applied. But let's click on Prime and let it render itself out, and then we can see the comparison between the two. Let's turn it off first of all, and let's look at the original image with all of the chrominance noise and the luminance speckles throughout. You can see it throughout the whole image there. And if we enable it, again, just like before, the viewer kicks in right away with the HQ noise reduction, and then Prime follows shortly thereafter. And all the details are left in place, but the noise has been very effectively removed. So, like I said, we really do believe this is the best noise reduction software on the planet. It works standalone, and it works equally well as a plugin for Lightroom, so you can just slot it right into your Lightroom workflow. Download the trial version. I suggest that you try it with your most difficult highest ISO images and see for yourself what it's capable of doing. And it's doing this intelligently. There are other controls that are available to me. By the way, if I click on this little question mark over here on any of the tools in the palette, you get a detailed description of what those tools do, and you might be confused. You look, okay, and it says, well, there's a luminance slider to reduce fine grain, but it also says there's a chrominance slider and a low frequency slider and something to control dead pixels. Well, where are those controls? Well, don't forget with OpticsPro, that we tend to show you a limited set of tools, and if you want to go even deeper still, you just click this little plus sign, and then the additional tools open up underneath, and you can hide and show those at will. And so without me further adjusting any of these other sliders, without me touching a single slider, Prime has done precisely the right thing to this particular image. And that's again part of the beauty of OpticsPro, is that with every correction, including noise reduction, it's using intelligence to do the right thing for you. So speaking of doing the right thing, let's move on to spot-weighted correction. And so we'll go ahead and start with that same image we were looking at earlier. Without me doing anything at all, OpticsPro has taken an image that looks like this, and it has turned it into this. So not bad, but if we want to push it a little bit further, we'll go into smart lighting, and if I bump it to medium, looks a little bit brighter, but it's starting to get a little muddy. I bring it out to strong, it's brighter still, but now you can see in the histogram that we moved out of the blacks, and those have become grays, and the image is pretty much washed out and dull. Whereas all I have to do is click on the spot weighted button on the right, the face is detected, and the image just pops and just looks stunning. And this was accomplished through face detection. Like I said, the face is automatically detected, and just like you would with your spot metering and camera, you can move this around. You could say, well, what happened if I put my spot to meter down here, or what if I put it up in the background, or I can make it larger or smaller. I can add a second one in if I wanted to. But it does the right thing. It puts it right in the right spot on the face, and it uses that region to intelligently apply the right tone map to the photo. So now we've gone from this to that, and all I did was enable the spot weighted feature, a single click in smart lighting. I didn't have to touch a single slider for shadow or highlight or mid contrast control. It's all done automatically. And I might have mentioned we believe this is the first such implementation of using face detection to make this kind of auto correction for images. As I said in the slides, it'll also detect multiple faces. And so let's just go ahead and crank this up to strong and click spot weighted. It tells us 2 faces have been detected. If we click on the tool, we can actually see, yep, there they are. And that's allowed us to go from this to that automatically. Some images that you're correcting appear to be just unsalvageable, like this one. The sun is already over the horizon. There's no fill light on Dad and his daughter whatsoever. They're completely in darkness. You'd probably mess around with shadows and highlight sliders for a while on this one, but in this case we can just go spot weighted, bump it up to strong, and it does the right thing. So again, to compare, we've gone from this original image to this here. Now in this case, if we want to click to see where the face has been detected, Dad's been detected because he's smiling, looking right at the camera. The daughter's face has not been detected because she's looking down at him, and it can't quite pick up the eyes. But nonetheless, it's done exactly, precisely the right thing, and this can be applied as a batch process. This is very, very important. So I could take and if I clear this out, I can actually take this image and this one and this one. I'll take these 3 images and I'll reset them. I'll press the reset button, which will remove the spot weighted feature, put them back to their default correction state. And now if I take this photo here where I've set spot weighted to strong mode, I say as a batch process, you know what, let's copy those correction settings and let's paste them onto these 3 photos. And I could paste them under dozens of photos if I want to, and the effect is automatically applied. But notice it does it intelligently. It's not just moving a single slider. It's doing it the right way. So it's adjusting it precisely for each individual image, using a single face detected, using 2 faces detected, and the corrections are applied very smartly to each image. Now, I mentioned during the slide part of the presentation that it can be used where faces aren't either detected or maybe are not even present, like in this landscape photo. You can still use the feature. If I click spot weighted, I get that indication that no face has been detected, but I can click the tool and I can simply drag out a spot or a region and say, well, this is the area that's in shadow. I'd like you to help me improve that. And then I can change the mode to whatever I want. In this case, I'll change it back to strong, and voila, we're done. So we've gone from this very, very difficult image to adjust with normal shadows, highlights, and mid-contrast, because you've got the sun peeking over the side of the rock, coming up over the horizon. We don't want to blow out the skies, but at the same time, we want to bring out all that detail in the shadow areas with the precise amount of contrast, and we've done it automatically. In fact, I could, if I wanted to, I could define a second region and say, well, this area is important to me as well, and get a slightly different effect, maybe with 2 regions detected. I drop down to medium, and this is unusual. I'm actually doing multi-spot weighted corrections, which is something I don't know of any camera that's capable of doing that, but we can actually do it in post-production, and all of the highlights are perfectly retained, and yet the detail, hopefully you can see that in the video conference, has come out in the shadows. As I say, we think we're the first ones to implement anything quite like this. It's very fast, very efficient, and it does a remarkable job without you touching a single slider. From there, let's move on to auto micro contrast. So let's go back to that photo that we were looking at earlier of the Turkish woman in the travertine field, and look at micro contrast. So if we enable contrast, there's now a little magic wand just to the right of the micro contrast slider. And so if we want these fine details in the travertine stone to pop, we just simply click on this little magic wand here, and you see the micro contrast value has been changed to 16 completely on its own. And let's go ahead and turn it off. So watch the image carefully. We'll turn it off. Okay, it kind of gets kind of soft a little bit there. Details aren't quite as clear. And we'll turn it on, and boom, they just pop. Maybe you want to see it in closer detail, so we'll go ahead and zoom in here, and let's try that again. So we'll turn it off right there, and we'll turn it on one more time. Boom, you just see all that detail come out in the stone. And so it's done the right thing. Now, as I mentioned, it's not really suitable for faces. But before I get to the face, I just want to show you one other image. So that one was, as I said, shot by Camilla Ferrari. Let's take a look at one of my photos here. This was shot at Winter Park at an Urcher freestyle competition. What I want you to pay attention to is all the snow that's being sprayed up as this mogul skier comes crashing down the course. So again, I'll click on the little magic wand, and you can see it's analyzed the image, also set the value to 16, and so we've gone from this is the original image without any corrections applied to that where it's razor sharp, and the snow spray is just pops right off the frame without, and this is the important thing, without over sharpening the image, which is the #1 mistake that a lot of users make. They don't know how far to push it. So in this particular case, if you're comfortable with that, you can defer to the wisdom of DxO's advanced image scientists and say, okay, that looks good to me, I'll go with it like that. Now, as I said, this feature is not at all appropriate for portraits for obvious reasons. And so we'll take a look at this image of the couple again, and I'll just pan over to my brother, and hopefully he won't mind. I'm just using this for demonstration purposes. If I crank up the micro contrast, you can see it has an absolutely disastrous effect on the face. The pores of the skin, every wrinkle, his stubble on his face, all is enhanced. It's horrible. And yet if we click on auto microcontrast, it detects that there's a face in this photo, and it sets the value to 0, as it should. So if you're using this as a batch process and want to apply it intelligently to a variety of images, it'll do the right thing. And one thing I do want to point out about the microcontrast is that if you swing it in the other direction, it has a really pleasing effect. So let's just drop it way down, and you can see without losing any of the detail in his eyes, the eyelashes, the eyebrows, the lips, all that detail is perfectly retained, and yet we've smoothed out all of the fine details in the skin. So it makes for a great one-slider skin smoothing correction for your images as well. And then the same is true for high ISO images. What I mean by that is it does the right thing. So if we go back to our photo of the surfer at night, I mean, the last thing that you want to do is to have microcontrast do something like this and enhance the noise in your images. That's what you want to remove. And so it's pretty smart in that it looks at the ISO of the image as well and says, well, this was shot at 12,000 ISO. I mean, I'll give you some microcontrast to help with these details, but we're only going to set the value at 6. And so it's always doing the right thing. So that's the microcontrast. And then lastly, I want to show you the automatic red eye correction. So let's go ahead and take a look at this photo, the same one that we saw on the slides. I'll just double click to zoom in, like so, and we'll find the auto red eye correction under detail in that palette. So we just enable it, and the correction preview kicks in, and that's it. The red eyes are automatically removed from the pupils. We can see that 2 red eyes were detected. If we want to actually see what it's done, you just click on the tool, and then you hover with your cursor, and you can see that it's detected the face, it's detected each of the eyes, it's detected the pupil. If for whatever reason it wasn't precise, which it is incredibly precise, but you could change this if you wanted to. You could change the dimensions on it. Obviously, that has a horrendous impact, and it's not doing the right thing right there, so I can close it at any point. And if it didn't detect the eye, if it failed to detect the eye, well, I can just click drag a region, and then it'll find it automatically for me. But the great thing is it is completely automatic, and so you can set up a bunch of images and have it as a batch process correct red eye to them completely automatically as it renders out the images. We've only got a couple minutes left, so I just want to point out that in addition to the Prime 2016 and the spot-weighted smart lighting correction and the auto microcontrast and the red eye, there are some other tools that have been enhanced as well, including selective tone. And so if we look at this photo that I shot in a museum in Siena in Italy, actually, sorry, in Florence, in Italy, if we turn on highlight clipping, so we get an overlay that shows where the highlights are being overexposed, and you can actually see that on the histogram as well to the right. So that's too hot. It's actually kind of off the histogram, off the chart here. We want to bring it down. We can use we can of course use the selective toning tool, but it's been dramatically revamped, and so the new selective toning tool has been reworked to much more efficiently recover information in the shadows and the highlights while avoiding flattening the midtones, which produces more natural results. And so let's go ahead and double click to zoom in on this. Maybe we'll zoom out just a little bit, like so. And if I drop the highlights way down, to about 61 or so, and I bring the midtones up to about 61 or so, just the exact inverse of that. Let me turn off the clipping, and we'll do before and after. So you can see that we've gone from here, where the highlights are completely blown out, to this image here, where all that detail is brought back down, and yet with a corresponding change in the midtones, we're able to retain the image, the details. It hasn't flattened out the image, and it hasn't created any artificial highlights, halo effects. So dramatic improvements in selective toning as well. And then the other thing that you might have noticed is that all of these controls have gotten faster. So the sliders themselves are dramatically faster, including controls, in fact, for noise reduction. So if for whatever reason we're working on this photo here with either the fast or the prime noise reduction, and maybe I had dead pixels, or I wanted to adjust the level of the chrominance application for prime, all of these are much, much faster and more responsive than they were before. And before I forget, because somebody in a previous webinar did ask, well, is the prime also effective at low ISO images? And for me, the answer is most definitely yes. And so I can actually show you what I see, which is if I put the region of interest window over here into this sort of shadow area on the photo we were looking at earlier, you can see there's quite a bit of noise there in the background, even though this image was shot at 100 ISO, and that's cleaned up and rendered perfectly in the preview window in prime. And yet, if I drag that window over to the right here, and we let it render itself out, you'll see that all of the details in the face and the eye, the eyebrow, the skin, all of those have been perfectly preserved. So the prime noise reduction has removed the noise but left all the details intact. So at least based on my experience, it works incredibly well on very low ISO images as well as extremely high ISO images. And then lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't point out the new full screen mode. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So we can just click in the toolbar. There's of course a keyboard shortcut, but that can take us right out to the full screen mode. At any time, you can tag or rate your images either as a pick or a reject, or use the number keys 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to rate the image. If you click on the little question mark here, elegant shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts slide out, including I, for example, for the EXIF information. So just by tapping the I key on the Mac, I can have the EXIF information visible to me. There's a little navigator here, so if I was zoomed in 1:1, I could use that navigator to move around in the image like so. So it's a great way to get rid of all the other tools and just focus on browsing your photos and seeing what effects have been applied to them. We're just about out of time, but there's two things I want to mention really quickly before we go, and that is don't forget that FilmPack and Viewpoint are available as plugins for OpticsPro, and you can do some pretty amazing things with them. I mean, FilmPack does perfect renditions of legendary film stocks, and I could do some really interesting things like take a digital image like this, and maybe all I want to do is apply the grain effect that I would get from Kodak Tri-X. So I'm literally taking the grain from a texture from a black and white stock, and in this case applying it to my digital image. And you have complete control over every single aspect of these legendary film stocks, and the grain reproductions are absolutely superb. And then lastly, it's just the Lightroom integration that I mentioned. And so if you happen to be a hardcore Lightroom user, you're using that for all your file image management, but now you get to an image like this and you've been playing with it with the various controls, and you just can't get it right. The sky keeps getting blown out every time you try to bring in the shadow areas. Well, you can, with using OpticsPro 11 as a plugin, you can go in and just say transfer this image over to OpticsPro. It appears there. You now have access to all of the controls inside of OpticsPro, including the smart the spot weighted feature that we were looking at earlier, and so you get it just the way you want, and then you just export it back to Lightroom, not only as a JPEG or as a TIFF, but as a DNG, and so that'll render out and send itself back directly to Lightroom with the in this case with the smart lighting applied, and then you can do the rest of your toning and your color rendering inside of Lightroom, and there's the image with the corrections applied loading up right back in Lightroom.